Okay, we are up to the 11th letter of the Iggeres HaKodesh. If you're following along, it's the 6th of Elul on the Chitas, page 116 in the Hebrew letters. Everybody hopefully can find it. So a couple of introductory points. Shalom Mordechai Rabashkin tells the story that when he was, as he describes it, in a place called prison, he would get a lot of mail. And getting mail in prison is a very high level of reverence, because it means that somebody out there cares about you. And he would get like bags of mail. And not all of the prisoners were happy for him that he got all of this mail. And one of the prisoners once said to him, "Why are you getting all this mail?" And as if it was taking away his mail. And he was a little scared of this guy. So he said, "Oh, would you like some of this mail?" So the guy goes, "Yeah." So he gave him one of the letters, which was written in Hebrew. And of course, the guy didn't see any value of it and threw it down at him, and that was the end of that. So he pointed out, what is the life lesson? The lesson is everybody gets their mail. And if you would get somebody else's mail, you wouldn't be able to read it, and it wouldn't be meaningful to you. So sometimes a person thinks, why does this happen to me? This shouldn't have happened. It's a mistake. The answer is, this is your mail. Now, we are familiar with this idea when something occurs that we are not so happy about. Well, what happens when something occurs that we're very happy about? Do we have, and here's sort of an inverse, beautiful illustration of up is down and down is up. Do we accept the beneficial, joyous things as also coming only exclusively from Hashem? Meaning, if something unpleasant happens and I don't get the parking spot, or they're out of blueberry muffins, and I think to myself, why is this happening? I say, it's all from Hashem. But what happens when I get the perfect parking spot and they have blueberry muffins on sale? Do I also say that this is too exactly from Hashem? Can I accept the joys as not just being my own good fortune, but that those come from Hashem? Both of them. And this is ultimately the crux of the letter, which seems almost impossible. And yet, this is what the Alter Rebbe at least demands that we aspire to, if not that we actually accomplish. That we view all material, even survival necessities, as exclusively for their spiritual service. So if we think, well, if a person eats steak every day, that's exorbitant and that's indulgent. What if he eats bread and water every day? That's also why. What is the goal of eating bread and water? So if we just had a very rigid, objective scale, we'd say above this threshold is considered indulgent, and beneath this threshold is considered tolerable. But we don't. We have a totally subjective, infinite relationship with Hashem. And so anything that we do has to have a, quote, in order to, what is the objective for which we eat, even if it's absolute basic subsistence. So again, this would seem to be perhaps applicable to the select few, the tzaddikim, the completely holy with a W, righteous people. And yet, as we'll see, the Alter Rebbe addresses this all in the singular. You know, in Hebrew, we have it in English in certain circumstances as well. The verbs take on a different form if they're in plural or singular. And all of this letter is written in the very strongly singular expression and so on. And again, the objective is essentially the whole message of Hasidus. Hopefully we say that for every letter and every line of Tanya. But once again, this is that example to direct us to what we call a conscious life choice, to utilize this material world rather than to avoid it, even though it feels like, wow, I must be doing something holy because all I do is eat bread and water. But eating bread and water can be just as indulgent as eating steak. Remember Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who said that he never had personal pleasure from this world to even the smallest degree, lived what would objectively be considered a very opulent life, but it was all in the service of Hashem. It was a way in which he entertained politicians to achieve benefits for the Jewish people, etc. The fourth Rebbe also lived a very opulent style. It was designed in the glory of Hashem. So either we could snicker and say that they're just flat out liars, because he said explicitly, I never benefited from this world, or we take him at his word. There's no in between there. There's no misunderstanding. There's no spectrum on it. When Rebbe said it, he said it pretty clearly, and he lived a very opulent lifestyle. So avoiding the material is a lot simpler. It's not fun, but it's simpler. Again, like if we imagine that we had some sort of absolute scale, we'd say, I wear rags and I eat dirt. So, but wearing rags and eating dirt, why should I do that? Well, I have to be alive. Why do I have to be alive? Because I'm hungry. Well, we have to be alive in order to serve Hashem. And therefore, everything, our aspiration is that everything that we do is designed so that we can, in fact, be in the service of Hashem. And the sort of hallmark of this, or the illustration is, do we act out of conscious awareness, or do we just act out of lunging? By lunging, I mean, again, probably this is more on the men's side and on the women's side, I hope, that if you're at the buffet line and the aggressive character of people to get their piece of roast beef or their sushi, it illustrates a certain characteristic that is not a conscious awareness. It's like, I can't help myself. And sometimes people say these things like, that chocolate cake just talks to me. I can't help myself. And we use these expressions. Of course, we don't mean them literally. I couldn't live without that sweater. I was dying to get that new couch. We use these terms, and again, they're exaggerated and they're metaphoric, but the mere sense that we utilize such terms for this is, again, an indication that it is an animal soul characteristic and not a godly soul. So again, it would be simpler if we just advocated some sort of minimalist of existence, but that itself can become extraordinarily self-important. I am so humble, I only eat bread and water, and so on. Essentially, this is the argument we just had in the parsha yesterday. Lavan, when he catches up with Yaakov, he claims the children are my children, the wealth is my wealth. What he means to say in the broader sense is, this world belongs to me. Worldly things, material things, are of the parameter of Lavan. In other words, shut up and pray. You are for doing holy things. You are for the world to come. And this world is for me. And leave us alone. We're twins, or as Esav says to Yaakov, we're twins. When we go past Avodah Zarah, that's my purview. And we go past Kedusha, that's your purview. Well, fine, I don't care. You want to do the holy things, you want to daven, that's fine. But don't mix into my life. Don't come into my life, which is the world of Gashmias. And our response is, no, we are here to make the world godly by seeing the world not as some hindrance or obstacle to godliness. On the contrary, the world exists to be the forum in which godliness is manifest. And this harkens to, again, it hopefully seems incredibly obvious to us, but just a reminder, this is not on page 1 of the Chumash. What is the whole purpose of creation? That God has a desire that this world be made into a welcoming place for him. The dira b'tachteinim. Now we know this, and it's ingrained in our minds and our thoughts, and it comes out like the water we swim in. But this is a medrash that I can just about tell you that nobody ever heard of this medrash, except that the Alter Rebbe brings it to the fore of our attention. That this world is not some sort of, like I said, nuisance, like, oh man, if only they wouldn't have eaten from the fruit and we could just be in Gan Eden. And if only we could just build one big giant base medrash and never have to worry. And every time we involve ourselves with the Gashmis world, it's like this big nuisance. And our message, the message of Hasidus, is no, we are not conceding the material world to materialism, even within our own usage of the material world, even when it comes to basic subsistence, just our basic ability to still be alive. We will not concede that to materialism. It is exclusively to evoke its innate Kedusha. And that's what the Nefesh HaBahamis doesn't like. The Nefesh HaBahamis has this opposition to the commandeering of the material for the use of the spiritual. The Nefesh HaBahamis wants to say, this is my world. Don't get in here. I daven mincha. I was nice to people. I gave tzedakah, and now this is mine. I gave my 10%. I gave my 20%. I washed my hands. I said hamoitzi, and now when I eat, I'm essentially no different than the animal. This is mine. And again, maybe this is more male than female, but I can only imagine that everybody has seen this character. Even it's kosher, kosher, kosher. It's got every hechsher. And I washed my hands, and I said al natilas yadayim, and I said hamoitzi. But now, in that moment of eating, am I different than an animal that also eats? In that moment of eating, am I different than the animal? And our objective is to be sanctified in that moment. And again, we had this 2 letters ago in letter number 9 that's called for an awareness in the virtuous things we do. Not only in when things don't go our way, to have the mentality that this is all a gift from Hashem and we all got the mail that we are intended to get. We do them because they're commandments, not just out of impulses. And again, remember, when we talk about the animal soul, animal is not that derogatory a term. Animals are kind to their young. Animals don't steal. Animals are not evil. They just act purely out of impulse. And our mission is to not act out of impulse, to act out of conscious. Think it, feel it, do it. The concept of Chabad, of the intellect, to drive the character and result in changed behavior. So again, it comes down to the ultimate question, and we see everything and every circumstance as being aligned with the infinity of Hashem. So again, we often talk about this when things don't go in an obviously godly way. Can we see it that way when things are going in a godly way? Because as it says in Chumash, we have a concern that we will, as it says, wax fat and declare the strength and power of my hand has accomplished this. And we'll talk about virtuous and good things. So we begin with a quote from the book of Daniel. Lahaskil chabina, that is, again, a quote from Daniel, to enlighten you, that is, again, as we mentioned, in the singular, with the understanding. Now, just a little background about this pasuk. The Alter Rebbe doesn't just quote a pasuk because it's a witticism for starting things off, although that is not an uncommon practice, that we want to begin with a biblical quote. It's a little bit more formal framework. But here, everything is precise, the background as well. This phrase, to enlighten you with understanding, was told to Daniel, who lived after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Remember, Daniel lived in that time, like when Purim occurred. That's why there's the interpretation that Hatach, the messenger, who went between Mordechai and Esther, was actually Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar, remember, is a bad guy. Destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. He took these 5 kids, threw them in the fire and the lion's den. Daniel was one of them, and his 5 comrades. So the Malach Gavriel, and remember Gavriel, the root word there is the word for might, strength. El, the last 2 letters of the angel's name is Hashem, so it's the might of Hashem, and not the might just in the capacity to build towers, but a little bit harshness, so some stuff that's like tough love, as we call it, that doesn't always appear as sweet and joyous. So the Malach Gavriel tells him this, again, to enlighten you with understanding, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, which again is what the Alter Rebbe is doing here. He's speaking to us in a tough time. In the previous letter, we spoke about soliciting tzedakah for Eretz Yisrael, with living through it again now. When haven't we been? And there was tough times then, and starvation and hunger and so on. So it's one of those Gavriel tough times. So he says, "Ki loizu haderech yishkein or Hashem." Now this is a quote from the book of Iyov. People are generally familiar with Iyov. which there's a lot of historical discussion as to who Eov was. Some even suggest he wasn't even Jewish. Some suggest it's a mashal. But Eov was this perfectly righteous man who had spiritual wealth and material wealth and family and so on. And the Satan told Hashem, you can't trust his virtue because it's only the result of all of the pleasantries that he has. And Hashem said, nah, and the Satan said, yaha. So Hashem decided to test him, took away his material wealth, took away his family, took away his health. And the bulk of the Sefer of Eov are his, we use the term friends, those who he's engaged with, who come to offer their condolence and to offer many of them their explanation as to why this happened. And it becomes the model for understanding the what's the word, the character of suffering that may go on in a person's life. So Hashem says to, or it says in the book, this is not the manner, which we'll talk about what that is, which is coming up, to reside. Remember that word yishkoin is like the word mishkan, that residence, the presence of Or Hashem, the light of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Remember, the different names for Hashem represent different stages of awareness of Hashem. The most profound awareness of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. We talk about Atzmus, it's today's Hayom Yom, Elokim, and so on. So the point is, if you want there to be Yishkein or Hashem, Hashem is the level or the aspect of God that, when expressed, overrides all unclarities, obfuscations, unawares of the infinity of Hashem. Or that Elokim is limited to. Yishkein or Hashem, the infinite light of Hashem. The infinite light of Hashem overrides the particulars. So again, there is a certain tendency that when things are going my way, I see that as coming from godliness. It's very joyous. I'm feeling generous. I'm feeling, what's the word I'm looking for? Magnanimous, and so on, because things are going my way. When things are chas v'shalom not going my way, so then I feel more stingy, not just materially, but I don't feel that great enthusiasm, like I want to be sharing my enthusiasm with godliness and so on. That's more of an Elokim, square pegs in the square holes and round pegs in the round holes type of attitude. And that's not the derech for Yishkein or Hashem. Since we are reaching for an infinity of Hashem, that is to sense the infinity of Hashem, even when it's not so tangibly obvious, even when it doesn't feel that way. That one, what is not the way to have Or Hashem, this infinite godliness, is to have, and this is a quote from Mishlei, from Proverbs, to have chafetz, which we'll talk about in a moment, in the physical life, the life of the flesh, which includes family and food. Now, again, it's not necessarily indulgence, but this word chafetz is particular. We talk a lot about our ratzain. Ratzain we translate as the word for will. What is that I want? The root of the word ratzain is the word rutz. Rutz means to run. What do I run after? You want to know what a person wants? What does he spend his time doing? What does he spend his money on? What does he run around doing? What does he jump up and down about? Every parent knows that your children will do what you do more than what you tell them to do. And even more than what you do is, what do you run after? What do they see that you're excited about, that gets you to jump up and down? Then there's an even deeper level, and that's the level that we are mentioning here, which is the level called chafetz. People are probably familiar with the term Chafetz Chaim. Not only the great sage who wrote a sefer that we simply referred to him by the name of a sefer, the Chafetz Chaim. He passed in the early 1900s. But Chafetz means to be so, it's not even passion or running. It is your essential desire. Because as much as a person says, I love to learn Torah, and a person says, I love to do mitzvahs, and I love my family, what we love ultimately, what we chafetz ultimately, is our connection with Hashem. Now, the alternative is my connection with my very physical life. In other words, what is worth giving up my life for? So hopefully we never have to make that decision. And it's not something that we experience in a literal sense, but it is something that we experience in the metaphoric sense. What am I willing to pass up for? Because that is my chafetz. So we say things like, there's nothing more important to me than family. There's nothing more important to me than existence. But even that limits my capacity to experience the infinity of Hashem. Now that's really harsh. What could be more important than my family? And again, the question is, why is that important? Why is it important that I am in pursuit of my children? Is it for, like the world will say, you know, we're all aware that this country has no future because nobody's having children except Arabs. I mean, that's the debate. That's just the demographic facts. So people are trying to talk about, oh, look how cute they are. Oh, we're going to have tax incentives. Oh, it's your legacy. All, valuable reasons and ways to persuade people, not markedly different than saying, come for Shabbos, the food is really good. Yeah, it's true. Coming for Shabbos, the food is good. Coming to shul, it's a community. It's all good. But it's not or Hashem because it's limited. It's still going to be limited to how much I enjoy it. It's still going to be limited in that sense. So what then is the alternative? Put aside your own ratzon. This is more than compliance, meaning when we read that quote from Pirkei Avos, it might say, look, you want to sleep late, but the world needs you to go to shul. You want to save money and buy non-kosher food. Hashem wants you to buy kosher food. So what is the consequence? I don't want to do it, but I do it anyway. And that is certainly lofty and virtuous. But here we're looking for something much greater. Hashem is not only looking for a compliance, which he is looking for, but again, remember that Hashem's goal is to be welcomed into this world. Now, we have probably all had the experience of somebody who is offered us a favor like he's doing us a favor. So I don't really want to be here. I really want to be somewhere else. And you can sense it in my facial expression and my body language, even if I'm perfectly compliant. But I don't really want to be here. So yes, that is put aside your will for his will. I want to be somewhere else. I'm here because Hashem wants me to be here. And that is, in fact, a form of surrender of my will. However, Hashem wants something greater. He wants us to make his will our will. We're all familiar with the story about how Hashem offered the Torah to all the nations. And each nation began with the question, what is in it? And Hashem tells them the thing that he knows they're not going to do. And they, in fact, say, no, thank you, and so on. What is the message there? That as soon as they said, when did they spoil their opportunity? Not when they said, no, we're not willing to give up idolatry, and we're not willing to keep Shabbos, and we're not willing to honor parents, and so on. They gave up their opportunity as soon as they asked the question, well, what does it say? Because now their message is, I'll see if I want to do it. So if somebody, again, this is a sort of life lesson. If somebody says, will you do me a favor? So it depends. If this is not somebody whom you are particularly trusting and close with, the answer should be, I will consider it, because that could be a manipulation. Whereas if this is somebody who you have absolute total trust in, so of course we go to, the Rebbe says to you, will you do this for me? The answer is always going to be yes, because you have absolute certainty that the one making the request is not doing something for themselves, not because they're going to get something out of it. They're not trying to manipulate you so they will get some consequence. And therefore, when the nation said, well, what does it say? So already, like, don't even bother. Don't even bother, because at best, you'll put aside what you want for what I want. And I'm not looking only for compliance, I'm looking for partners. Just to pontificate for half a moment, this is essentially what we talk about on Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, if we come to shul and say, we might, and it's not even bad, but it's limited. We say, my goal is to be written and sealed for a good, healthy, happy, wonderful, sweet year. Amen. That's my goal. What do I got to do to get that? So you told me I got to come, I got to stand up, sit down, listen to the shofar, read the words, behave, don't talk nonsense talk, no chitty chat, go blow the shofar, show up on Yom Kippur, fast, read the words, sing the songs, stand up, sit down, build the sukkah, shake the lulav, dance with the Torah. Done. I got it. Goodbye, see you next time. If that's my objective. It's not a bad objective, and it's not a bad behavior. It is, however, limited. Since it's limited, it gets a limited result. Do me a favor like you're doing me a favor. In contrast, Hashem is asking, will you be a partner with me? Will you make my objectives your objectives? That's the difference between doing what Hashem wants and becoming one with Hashem. To become one with Hashem, I say, your will is my will. I'm not just standing here in compliance and even putting a smile on my face, but the essence of my identity. If you dig all the way deep down, I don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else. So there's a detachment between us. And that's what Hashem is hoping to override. And that's what it means in the fullest sense of Betel Ritzoincha B'nei Ritzoinoi. The Hainu, that means Shi Ritzoinoi Batel B'Metzias, that my will should be absolutely removed, not just pushed down. Like I said, really, I want to sleep late. I'll force myself out of bed to go and do a mitzvah. It's not simply, or it's not limited to compliance. It is about completely transforming my whole makeup and identity. To have absolutely no pursuing ratzain of the physical material world, not to be running after that, not to be pursuing it. That's not what I'm running after. Which is the ratzain, the insatiable ratzain of the nefesh habahamis. That's not where I'm after. Kulam hanechlol mabane chayim mezayna. And that includes even the desire for children, for life, and basic material sustenance. So again, it would be simpler, not easy, but simpler if we just had some sort of threshold. It's like a speed limit. And say, as long as you don't spend this much money on food, you're good. And again, this manifests itself in that attitude. I'm done doing that. Now this is about me. Now this is me time. Now I'm just about my own self-indulgence. Wouldn't it be nice if we just had one day when we could eat cheeseburgers? So we say, no. Why? Because that means every day I'm keeping kosher, I'm thinking I really want to be eating cheeseburgers. Now, again, sometimes we're so eager, maybe even dependent on a favor, that we'll take it any way we can get it. But it certainly does not build you need to have someone do you a favor like they're doing you a favor. That someone doing me a favor like they're doing me a favor, there's always going to be a distance between us. We're not going to be close, even though I'm totally compliant. Now, again, sometimes in our society, we mix this up. We have greater loyalty to our grocery store than we do even to our family. we become detached from it because it's only about that is our interpersonal relationships become mercantilized. What do I got to do? And then you'll be nice to me. Okay, so we continue. Like it says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that you live against your will. You're born against your will and you die against your will. That's why the baby is born crying, and that's why at the end of his life, a person is holding on to his life. Now, commonly, this phrase is invoked when things don't go your way. When somebody, chas v'sholem, has suffering, we tell them, your life is here against your will. Now, there was actually a genuine court case with this woman who was pregnant, and she was misdiagnosed by the doctor, and the child was born with terrible, severe handicaps. And the mother sued the doctor, and she said, if he would have told me, I would have terminated the pregnancy. And she won some settlement. And then, and this is the interesting element, the child sued the doctor. He said, I shouldn't have been born, and I've lived a life of suffering because of you. So it was an interesting, and again, I didn't read all the legal briefs and so on, but just a very brief summary point. The Illinois court declined it. They said, we have no way of judging to know that it's better to not be alive and to never been born than it is to be born and have suffering in one's life. Maybe never have suffering, but the concept is that Torah wants us to simply live all of our life as it is on a mission from Hashem, that we live because this is the desire of Hashem, to live our lives in this manner. And that's what we mean by you live against your will. Not only if, God forbid, you're having a rough day, but even if you're having all the blessings of health and wealth and family and camaraderie and love and so on, you're having all of this good stuff, you are still living because that is the will of Hashem. That's why you live. And if we can have that kind of attitude, then whenever I go to eat or I go to do anything of the physical or anything of the spiritual, why do I daven? I don't know. That's what you're supposed to do. Or I daven so that I'll get all the things I need. Why do I learn? Because I need to know how to keep Shabbos. Or I learn because it's very interesting. We are aspiring. Our aspiration is, I learn because it's Hashem's will. I daven because it's Hashem's will. I eat because it's Hashem's will. So when it's Hashem's will that I not eat, I don't eat. And when it's Hashem's will that I not do that, I don't do it. So like it's coming up in a couple of weeks, the Rebbe Rashab was not fond of people who said, oh, I can't restrain myself from studying Torah on Nittelnach. It's so difficult. So you say, wow, what a virtuous guy. You say, this guy is really at a high level. And it would take them as being sincere. It's not some sort of phony thing. But the Rebbe Rashab was not fond of that. Why aren't you fond of that? Because we learn because it's Hashem's will. And if Hashem says, don't learn now, then don't learn now. Like the Rebbe used to chase the students out of the yeshiva when it was time to go teach the kids on what they called the release time on Wednesday. So here we go. The letter is now going to address this challenge, which, again, is no different under all circumstances. How do we serve Hashem when things are not going our way? How do we serve Hashem when things are imperfect and so on? The explanation is, Hurak amuna amitius beyoytze bereshis. The only way to achieve this type of level, which is almost an equanimity under all circumstances, much like the Talmud says that just as we declare Baruch Hashem for pleasantries, so too we have to declare it even when it's unpleasant. Essentially, we would say nothing is a mistake. That's essentially the message. It happens because it is the will of Hashem. And if it's the will of Hashem, it's my mail. And I get my mail. Oh, I'd like to get that guy's mail. If I got that guy's mail, I wouldn't be able to read it. We get what we need. It's like, it's like a Chabad joke. Excuse me, are you Jewish? Yes. Did you shake the lulav and esrog today? No. Why not? It's not Sukkot. It's not meant for now. That's not the time to do it. So how do we achieve this? And again, I guess at every generation, everybody ultimately is aspiring to this. It's a lot easier for sure. May Hashem make it easy on us to serve Hashem and be magnanimous of character when things are on a good roll. When we have material wealth, we have our health, we have nachas from our children. It's a lot easier to be generous of spirit with our time and our energy and our emotions and our resources when things are going well. Well, what about when things aren't going so well? They say when Mashiach comes, we'll long for those times of Gullus. Oh, yeah, I double dog dare you. Let's see. But again, the idea is one that I imagine we're all familiar with. So the Alter Rebbe begins and he says, you need Amuna Amitius and the Yotzeh Bereshis. So let's break these words down. Amuna is a word that we are familiar with. It's translated as belief and faith and so forth. And as we have talked about, it comes from the word to be a skilled craftsman, an uman. An uman is an expert at something. So unfortunately, in the secular world, and it creeps into our world, the word amuna or the word belief is thrown around like an item. Oh, I believe. Do you believe? It's like a commodity. Do you have it? I have it. You don't have it. Or it's just some sort of random speculation. Like, I believe it's going to rain tomorrow. It's some sort of acceptance of a fact that I determine. Yes, I believe you that there's a planet called Jupiter. As if my belief makes it true or not. And I don't believe you, so therefore it's not true. So when it comes to Hashem, those words don't capture the meaning of the word Amunah. It's not just, yes, I believe in Hashem, like I believe that today is Sunday, or it seems reasonable to me, like I believe it's going to rain tomorrow, or I've seen the evidence and I've decided that I accept it as factual. Hashem's existence is not subject to our analysis. Amunah means that it is genuinely embedded within us, like a skill, like the fireman who's woken up in the middle of the night and instinctively puts on his uniform, slides down the pole, gets up without thinking about it. It's so absolutely embedded. We've used the analogy before. It's like the skill of reading. If you can remember when you're a little child and you're sounding out each letter and have to remember what each shape represents and the sound that it represents, and sometimes those sounds change when they are combined sounds, like Chabad and Chicago, they start to get confused. And then one day you just read. So when you look at the word, you just read it. And all the jokes about the eye chart have to be random letters, because you want to know if he can really see the letters, or is he just assuming what the word is. And you've probably all seen those visual examples where they deliberately misspell the word, but people don't notice it because their mind goes to what should be there, even if it's not there. I think everyone's familiar with this. That's what Amunah means. It's so intuitive, you can't unsee it. You can't not notice it. And that's why the Alter Rebbe here calls it Amunah Amitius. Remember, the word truth is not just the opposite of false. It means it is true under all circumstances. Aleph, the first letter, Mem, the middle letter, Taf, the last letter, like we would say from top to bottom, through and through, soup to nuts, nose to toes, all of that kind of visual illustration about how the Amunah passes through the entire person and comes out spontaneously. There doesn't have to be any thought put into it. It simply comes out without any hesitation. That's what Amunah Amitius means. It's that same Amunah under all circumstances. And that's essentially this message, to be so anchored that nothing will startle the person out of their Amunah. There is a saying that you'll know what someone's native language is in the language in which they count money and in which they respond when they hit their thumb with the hammer. It comes out spontaneously without any hesitation. The immediacy of it means that it's so embedded within. And we see it, we're blessed in our community. You ask a kid, what's a quarter? The kid tells you, tzedakah. What's water for? To wash nagelwasser. Some people use money to buy groceries. Really? Oh, yeah, I guess so. Right? He doesn't know that. He just sees it as a mechanism to do a mitzvah. Maybe an example that we have is the esrog. I mean, it's true that esrogs exist independent of the mitzvah, but I would never know about an esrog any more than I would know about some rare species of fruit that only exists in the African jungle, if not for the mitzvah. So as far as I'm concerned, the only purpose for an esrog is for the mitzvah of lulav and esrog. And the fact that they also make jelly out of it and also make liqueurs is just a marketing thing to sell you more stuff on Sukkot. So imagine if we could see all of materialism like we see the esrog as only existing for the purpose of the mitzvah. The Yoitzer Bereshis, who is the Yoitzer Bereshis? So you recognize this in the Aleinu Tefillah at the end of davening. We refer to Hashem as Yoitzer Bereshis. Now, these two words, Yoitzer Bereshis, translate as the artist of the initial creation. Yotzer is art. It's also from the word tsar, not tsar as in pain, but tsar like Mitzrayim, that is to be fine, to be defined. And an artist, of course, has to be defined. Jackson Pollock notwithstanding. It's got to be precise. That's what art is, whether it's musical art or performing art or visual arts and so on. So in context, it refers to all creations come from that first level, that Bereshis, that beginning level. Now imagine if we could develop the ability to perceive and visualize all of creation as coming from the artist creator. If we saw it coming that way, it's just like, a kid's brother jumps out of the closet and scares him. If he knew it was his brother, it wouldn't scare him. Or a child feels abandoned. If he knew that his mother was standing behind him, he sees his mother. Nothing's changed factually, except his awareness. Now he sees that his mother is standing next to him. He's still standing exactly where he was. Or as the Talmud describes it, if a person is hungry and you bring him a basket of food, he's already somewhat sated. He didn't eat it yet, but the mere fact that he has the visual awareness calms his anxiety. Well, if we could develop that type of awareness to see the infinity of Hashem at all moments and never feel abandoned, if we could develop that, we would in fact never suffer, because we'd see that it's coming from Hashem. We'd see godliness right there. Hainu shabriya yesh miyayin hanikra reishis chachma. V'hi chachmasa she'enu musegel l'shum nivra habriya. Hazoisi b'chol eis v'rega she'mesaven kol abruyim yesh miyayin v'chachmasa yisbarach hamachayis hakol. That is, we can develop an awareness, a sensitivity, that we see the creation constantly, consistently, and unchangingly as a creation of some thing from no thing. Hashem is not a thing. We create a thing from a no thing, and therefore it is constantly happening. How can we develop this idea that nothing is ultimately purely bad? Is when we see that everything comes from Hashem. This is the ultimate theological question. How can everything come from Hashem, and yet there's unhappiness and suffering and so forth? Because deep within that yesh, that presence, there is the ayin, there is the non-existence, there is the no thing that is constantly and continuously giving it existence. And this is a classic point which the Alter Rebbe emphasized in the second section of Tanya, the Shara Yichud V'Amunah, that creation is not a given. Creation is like a thought. And as soon as Hashem thinks it, it is. And if Hashem stops thinking it, not only it is not, it never was. It was never there. And you may recall we used that analogy of the author who comes up and he writes 2 chapters about a character. Then he decides to remove that character, and it's as if that character never existed. But there is a residue of that character that's been blended into some other character, or whatever that may be. And you may recall, as we talked about, that the Alter Rebbe initially was going to publish the Shar HaYichud V'Amunah, the gate of the oneness and trust in Hashem, before he would even print the Sefer Shel Beinanim, the book of the intermediate man. And the concept behind that was that a person first has to know Hashem before he can serve Hashem. And then the Alter Rebbe said, you know what? We are so eager, desperate to develop a way to be in connection with Hashem that even if we don't really know who Hashem is, we can still develop that connection. And that was the impetus to publish the Sefer Shel Beinanim before the Shar Yichud V'Amunah. And here the Alter Rebbe is referencing the essence of the Shar Yichud V'Amunah, that creation is only in existence because Hashem is giving it existence. So rather than saying, I'm here, and then speculating about God and whether God exists and whether God interferes in the world and whether God caused me to get this good parking spot and the blueberry muffins to be on sale or not, the Tanya is telling us, no, you got it backwards. Hashem is here. That's the given. Whether or not the world is here, that's a secondary question. That's worthy of speculation. So whereas the animal soul, the instinctual says, I'm here, this is what I need. Will God provide what I need? Will God give me meaning? Will God give me direction? Will God give me joy? Will God give me purpose? And our answer is yes, 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 and yes. But it's backwards. And therefore, I'm always testing God. I'm always saying, well, maybe there's a better one. The reverse is really what Avraham Avinu brought to the world. Just to talk for a moment, I know my tendency to go down these paths, but why was Nimrod, why is everybody all upset at Avraham? Because he talked about his God. Everybody had gods. His father sold idols. There were all these gods. So he's got his own God. What's the difference? Why do they care so much about his God? Because he thought his God was better than their gods? Everybody thought that. Everybody thought my God is the better God. So what? He was a little more loud-mouthed about it. But why was he so hated? And by extension, to this day, everybody's got a God. You got a God. I got a God. You don't like my God. I don't like your God. And fine. So what? And we explained that the difference was not just that Avram had a different God than them. It's that Abraham's message was, no, you have it backwards. They saw their gods as the best providers. This is the God who provides health. This is the God who provides material wealth. This is the God who provides fertility. They had all these different individual gods. And if you found me a God who did it better, fine. I mean, essentially, it's technology replacing technology. First, everybody had a Palm Pilot. Then we had a BlackBerry. Now we have an iPhone. In fact, that's it. Much, much simpler. Works out so much easier. Abraham comes along and he says, no, you have it upside down. It's not that I'm here and I'm looking for the God or the message that is going to provide me with what I want. The opposite is true. God is here, and we are designed to provide God with what he needs. And that's what annoyed them. They did not like that. Are you saying that it's my purpose to serve God? Now, some people say, well, how dare you suggest that I can do anything for God? How could you suggest such a thing? God is perfect and God is immutable. And we say that this is the beauty of God, that he makes himself voluntarily, yes, wanting of something from us. Others said, well, why should I do something for God unless he's going to do something for me? So I'm willing to engage in a mercantile relationship, and I'm willing to offer these sacrifices or conform behaviors so that God will give me what I want. So if I pray to God and I flatter God and I bribe God, he'll make it rain and my crops will grow and my children will be healthy. I'm willing to do that. That's a fair deal. Just like I pay the farmer for the fruits and vegetables and I pay the plumber to fix my plumbing, I'll pay God to do what I want him to do. Okay. And Abraham came along and he said, no, Kel Olam, not Kel HaOlam. You got it backwards. That they didn't like. That's why they didn't like Abraham. Not because he just had a different God, because he was the only one who talked about a creator God. They didn't care who created the world. They just cared who's going to give me what I want. And Abraham's message is not just that my God is bigger and better and will give you more of what you want than your God is. You've got this upside down. And that's what they didn't like. And to this day, that's why they don't like the Jews, because the Jews keep telling them that we're not here just to get stuff. We're here to be of service to Hashem. And that annoys them. They don't like it. I mean, we see it, in micro bursts in this world, not only about Jews. They're out to get Mr. Rogers. They're out to get anybody. Oh, nobody is so virtuous. You'll see. He's hiding his 20 Rolls Royces somewhere. He's a bad person, because it bothers them that somebody would be genuinely altruistic and virtuous, because it makes them feel like, well, what do you mean? It's all about what I can get. The world values how many people serve me, not how many people I serve. Right? We quote boast. Oh, I have somebody mow my lawn, shine my shoes, and so on. We're not boasting. I did this for other people. I did this for other people. I gave this to other people. That's not what's on our mind. Okay, we continue. So when a person takes this abstraction that Hashem is the creator of the world, is creating the world, is continuously bringing the world into existence, even the struggles and so on. This is the bridge from the makif, the conceptual idea, I believe in God, down to the panimi, the personalized. And that's why the emphasis is on the das. The next line, Yitzayir b'daitoi, haviyasa miyayin b'chol rega b'rega mamish. At every moment, he has the das quality. Now, within the area of the academic, das, which is the pragmatic, is not as valued as chachma. Chachma is the conceptual genius. Das is the pragmatic, which is why there's a certain glory associated with the poet that's not associated with the engineer. Because who's to say whether this poem is good or bad? But if the bridge falls down, it's bad. There's no subjectivity to the analysis of the bridge. The bridge it stays, it's there, it's going to be there forever. It falls down, he's a bad engineer. So in the infinite characteristic, in the romanticism of intellect, das is kind of boring. In the pragmatic, in the purpose for which Hashem created us, das is the most challenging. Das is turning conceptual ideas into changed character and changed behavior. I've certainly shared this story before. This man, I haven't seen him in many years, an interesting guy, not Jewish, and he tells his life story, which is an interesting story. And he talks about this one time where he made a bad investment and he lost a significant amount of money, which he was very distraught about. And he describes how he lay in bed all night, tossing and turning, thinking about all of the things that he had studied in his upbringing. Basically, things that we would confirm that it's all from God, everything is good, material things are transient anyway. And he writes in his book that after a nighttime of sleepless self-analysis and introspection, I concluded, I want my money back. That's what he concluded. And self-deprecatingly, right? Meaning that's the hard part. The hard part is to get the das going, to connect the idea. Yes, I know, but it's not penetrating my very existence. So that is our strategy to have the good come to us, when we can take the abstract, absorb it through the intellect, pass it down to the heart, to where we change our character, not just restrain it. Mind rules the heart. At first, it may have to overrule the heart. Eventually, we hope that it will transform the heart and it will manifest in changed behavior. This is our objective. So if we do that, if we could manage to mamish have this type of perspective, it would never even enter our thought processes. Kiraloi, that something is bad. Now, again, there's a difference between bad and unpleasant. But even the unpleasantry, it's the classic thing. You walk into the gym and somebody is lifting weights and straining and their face is contorted and they're crying out in discomfort. And they think, wow, this person must be being punished for some horrible thing that they did. And then you find out that they're doing it willfully because they understand the greater good of it, or getting a root canal, or whatever it may be. The change of perspective suddenly changes the entirety of it. So we all experience, at least at some level, now we're trying to reach to that loftier level, where we recognize that a painful experience is actually a gift from Hashem. It's hard, but it is something that we have all touched at some level in our lives. So once we develop this awareness, all you got to do, but if we can develop this degree of awareness, we would never rise up to our das. Again, it's all coming from Hashem, whether we like it, we don't like it. No matter what that pain is, whether it's a financial pain, maybe we never know from it, children, life, health, whatever it is, we have this total equanimity. So we don't just panic and then just do whatever we want to do. We have this kind of clarity. Oshari Yisur and any other suffering, ba'olam, that we may go through in the world. Harei ha'ayin, this constant source of creation, the no thing, the nothing that is constantly sustaining all existence, Shi Chachmasa Yisbarech, which is God's Chachman, again, not his genius, and that is the infinity of Hashem, who Makar Achaim V'Hatoy V'Oinek. That is the source of life and good and pleasure. And perhaps this is why the Rebbe often would say we should have good that is visible and obvious. In Hebrew, Toiv Hanira V'Hanigla. Good that is evident and obvious. It's always good. Yeah, but I don't want just a Gamzula Tova good. I want it to be evident and obvious good. There's an old joke. It's actually a semi sort of a joke within a joke. This Gentile comic asked these two Jewish comics. This part of the story is true. He says, the Jews are known to be so funny. Tell me a Jewish joke. So the two guys, the Jewish comic says to him, these two Gentiles meet. One says to the other, how's business? The other one says, great. So the other Jewish comic begins laughing hysterically. And the non-Jewish comic goes, I don't get it. What's the joke? Says, well, that's the point. Two Jews meet. They say, it's horrible. Everything is complaining. So to them, it's a joke that people would say that everything is great. So it's like a joke within a sarcastic mentality. So this is what we're trying to develop, this sort of reverse sarcasm where we always say everything is horrible and terrible. Concurrently, when you say to somebody, how are things? And he says, things are Baruch Hashem, as the Rebbe once said to somebody, that's what you have to say, but how are things? So, right, it's unpleasant. It's not bad. And we have to watch our language with this. The Rebbe talked about, what was the phrase? Not deadlines, but due dates, watch our terminology. Things are not bad or terrible. Their goodness is not evident. It's a challenge. It's something that we don't see the godliness yet, etc. Because when we declare it something, the language starts to set that mode. And this is what we're talking about here. Hu makar chaim v'atoy v'oinek. Hu ha'eidin shalamayim mi'olam haba. Rak she'minei she'enu musik. V'chenin maloi ra o yisurim. Again, it appears to us that way. How is it? It feels hurtful. It feels painful. It feels sorrowful. Because there's a level of godliness there that we don't see. There's a level of godliness that we don't see. And again, we're just looking at Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov has a far more, quote, painful life than Esav. he's got to run away, and his nephew takes all his money, and he has to sleep in the forest, and he goes to an uncle who cheats him and lies to him, and his daughter is abducted, and his son is abducted, and another son is held prisoner, and he thinks Binyamin, and his wife dies on the road. He's got a much more harsh life. And Esav's got a nice life. He's born Esav, he lives Esav, he dies Esav. He doesn't have to run away. He doesn't have to sleep in the forest. He doesn't have all of his wealth taken. But long term, at the end of the parsha this week, when we try to make out any sense of a family tree for Esav, you don't. You have this one, she's his daughter, but she's also the mother of his child. I mean, all this depraved insanity, which essentially that's the message. The message is the path of Esav just gets you total insanity. It doesn't get you any Kedusha. And in Yaakov, so we know how the story ends. Oh, it was a good thing he did. Oh, that was good. That was good. But it doesn't look so good in the moment. It doesn't look so good in the moment. Perhaps, as we'll learn from the Rebbe Marash, to say, L'chadchila hariber, that we should immediately go to the end. That's another way of understanding it. Let's go right to the end where it all works out. Let's go right to the end where it all works out. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue next of all.